later. So, all right. So welcome everyone to our June, I got it right this time, June book club meeting, Read with Sharon book club meeting. And we're reading this unbelievably incredible book by Mark Sullivan, All the Glimmering Stars. And Mark joins us tonight from Flathead Lake.
Yep.
I got it right, in Montana. And he is the only guy on tonight, I think. So welcome, Mark. We're so glad to have you join us for this month's book club.
Well,
So before we get started, I just wanted to say that this book, I don't even know how to begin, but it is so much more emotional than the other two I have read by you. You know, the Beneath the Scarlet Sky and The Last Green Valley. I got to tell you, you had me crying on page 23. I don't know that I've ever cried at page 23. That's pretty phenomenal. You know, I'm crying over a little girl having measles. And I don't know how you did it, and we'll talk about sort of how you did it in a bit, but in my mind, it's probably one of the most emotional stories I've read in a really long time. And I don't even know how to congratulate you or thank you or even comment on that, but you've done an incredible job with this.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to start something which in my mind, which is something I really don't do a lot, but I'm going to do it in this case. I think it's really interesting. All of us that read the book have read the author's notes. And I don't like to repeat the author's notes, but I'd like for you, if you don't mind tonight, to just sort of expand a little bit about your discovery of the story and how it ties to, you know, what's important to you in terms of your work in the Peace Corps that you did in Africa, and just sort of, you know, give us an overview of that. I know most of us probably read that, but I think to hear it from you, especially because I know how tied you were to this kind of a story and this particular place.
Yeah, so after I wrote Beneath the Scarlet Sky, and it was reinforced after the publication of Last Green Valley, those stories worked because I believed that they were inherently moving, inspiring, healing to some people, and potentially transformative to other readers and to myself, you know, when I started them. So I was looking for that kind of story. And I was very patient. I knew I was close, but I wasn't seeing it. And then both my sons were big ski racers when they were young, and they moved away from home when they were in their like about 14, 15 years old, and they went to Salt Lake City to try to make the U.S. ski team, and went to school there and trained at Park City. And they lived with this guy, Alan Hayes, who, among other things, invented the computer mouse. And he was their host dad. And Alan became a part of our family. He was like their second father. And Alan, among other things, raised like 30 plus teenage boys like this over the course of 25 years. And so my kids were really close to him, and Alan had back surgery, and he got a clot, and he died suddenly, like out of the blue. And it really shook them up, and they went down immediately to Salt Lake from Montana. And kids, you know, grown-up guys started flying in from all over the world, literally, because they were so upset about Alan dying. And one of them was Eric Ulrich, who at the time was the squadron commander of SEAL Team 6 for Africa and the Middle East. He was the top counter-terrorist for the United States in the Middle East. And, you know, they were telling Alan stories, and he was one of the executors, and Connor Sullivan, my son, who's also a novelist, was the other executor. And one night, Eric tells him this story, you know, about Anthony and Florence. And Connor's dumbfounded, and he calls me up first thing the next morning. He said, "Dad, I think I found your story. It's a story of humanity, takes place in Africa, and I want you to hear the rest of it from Eric and Mick." And Mick, at the time, was the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense under General Mattis. He'd been a former member of the CIA as a paramilitary officer. If you've ever seen the movie 12 Strong, about the first 12 guys into Afghanistan after 9/11, Mick was one of them. And so it took a while. They were both, Eric was leaving the SEALs, and Mick was leaving the government, and they moved Eric back home to Whitefish, Montana, which is north of me about 40 miles. and Mick moved there too, and they started a consulting business. But they came down to my house in Bozeman, and they told me the story, and I knew I was doing it, and they showed me this documentary that they had made, amateur documentary, which was so compelling just because Anthony was on it. There wasn't a lot of Florence at the time. And I knew without a doubt that the story was really going to function on whether I could get Florence to open up to me.
Now, she doesn't speak English very well or at all,
No,
right? So that was,
she doesn't speak English very well. So we had an Atroli interpreter when we went. We were supposed to go in June of 20, but of course the pandemic blew us out for a year. We went in June of 21. We were scheduled to spend 3 weeks there, chasing the story, Mick, Eric, and I, along with Florence and Anthony and their kids and stuff. So unfortunately that got cut short because the Delta variant raised its head while we were there, and it was becoming very apparent the country was going to shut down. So we left after 16 days, and we barely got out of there. We had to sort of buy our way out on it because the Emirates wouldn't fly us out, so we had to come out on air cutter. And we landed back in Seattle, and we got this alert that Uganda was closed for 6 weeks. So we would have been trapped in there for 6 weeks. But I spent a lot of time with him all day long, every day for 15 days. And a lot of those days it was me and Florence and the interpreter. And I was really blessed that Florence gradually warmed up to me and she began to open up to me. And because I said, look, the only way this is going to work is if you're frank. You got to tell me what happened. I promise I will not do anything exploitive with it, but I need to know what happened. And I was lucky that she gradually warmed up to me and started talking and told me all the stuff. Now, I knew a little bit, for example, those of you who've read the story of the giving birth scenes in the Nile in the firefight. But when she told me the story, verbatim, first person, I was just stunned. I was like, okay, this is one of the greatest sub-stories I've ever heard in my life. And, I got to be able to do this justice. So anyway, I came back and I started writing, and I was lucky that I got the voice of it very early. I understood that kind of medium because this could have easily been a story that people just say, I can't deal with, I can't take it. And I didn't want that to happen. I wanted people to finish the story. So I was constantly balancing what was happening to them with their emotional reaction, where they were on the arc of their story, how they managed to hold on to their humanity. All these things went into the final product.
well, when you talk about, getting her to open up, one of my questions was, not really a question, but a comment, and sort of how you did that is that you almost had to be like a therapist, like a psychoanalyst, I would imagine. I mean, to get someone who, first off, you're a guy, no offense, but, having a woman talk to a man about, the harrowing things that happen to her, who doesn't speak her language, who's not from her culture, how did you, sort of psychoanalyze her or become that therapist that she felt so comfortable and trusting that she could tell you that truth?
Yeah, well, first of all, there was no judgment on my part. That was, I told her that right off the bat. I said, look, you were kidnapped. And I know that, and I'm not here in any way to shame you. I mean, you went through shaming when you came back with certain women who crapped on her and everything. But I said, I'm not all about that. I just want to tell your story in a way that fits your goals, which they want to end child soldiering. And they know that their story could do it. So I just stayed quiet when I sensed that she was tense and gradually let her talk it out. And I'm pretty good at this stuff. I spent a lot of time in my own private life going to India and studying with, for want of a better term, spiritual masters who have this incredible insight into human behavior. And what motivates people. And that has really transformed the way I think about stories now, you know. So that's how I did it. I tried to be as sensitive as I could. I tried to be like no judgment, no comparison, nothing, and just let her talk.
So on that note, I mean, I'm sorry, guys, I'm probably talking more than I normally do. They're all probably going to yell at me because I know they got 1,000 questions. But, you know, when I was the whole soldier, humans, I mean, the child soldiering, the training, the soldier training they were put through is one of the most difficult pieces of this book to read. I mean, there's a lot of things that are difficult, but that's really unbelievably difficult. And so, my question to you is, as an author, how did you regulate your own emotions? When you first heard the story, you know, whatever from Florence or from Anthony or from whomever you were interviewing, and then how did you, you know, how were you able to unpack that and then write that the way you've done? You know what I'm saying? I mean, because I mean, I would have found myself just, you know, just so struck. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I could have written it the way you did. And that's what I'm trying to get to. How did you deal with your own emotions during this time in order to, you know, to be able to capture it?
Yeah, I had to let him be raw. You know, I had to, my job when I'm doing this kind of thing is to, in a sense, let these people's story flow through me. And I feel it. I have to, or otherwise I'm not going to write about it correctly. You can ask my wife. I have difficult days when I write some of this stuff. It was the same thing in The Last Green Valley. It was the same thing in Beneath the Scarlet Sky. In all three of those books, there were times where I just left the room like shell shocked from what I'd been, you know, had to face and had to channel through me. But I also was very focused on what the intent of the book was, which was to take people in, give them insider's account of what it's like to be a child forced into combat, and yet also to keep my eye firmly on the focus that this story is a triumph. It's not a story of devastation. It's a story ultimately of these two remarkably good people who managed to triumph over impossible evil. And I kept that straight. That's what the story is, you know, and you have to tell what happened, but you can't wallow in it. And this was one of the things about the two of them that I was, right from the get-go, I was completely in awe of them because, you know, in this day and age, they could have been professional victims, right? That's all we would have heard about. You know, look what happened to me, woe is me, and I hate this guy, and that's not what happened. They transcended victimology. You know, they went beyond it. And when you meet them in person, like especially Florence, she glows from inside. And it's because of what they went through and who they became despite what they went through.
And I will contend that the way you wrote them too, is from the very beginning, from the very first pages of them, you saw in those children. I mean, I think the first Florence was 4 when you started writing, I guess, about her character. There was this spirit in my mind of positivity, you know, that just permeated from her. I don't know how else to describe it. And I think that, in my mind, sort of the buoyancy that took them through this. You know, I mean, obviously not unscathed, but they reached the other side.
Yeah.
Did you find that in both of them, that sort of that inner positivity? Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, they this is funny because again, they could have been victims and spent their whole life worrying at what had happened to them. But instead, they're incredibly inspiring people. They consider every day of their life a miracle. And this is one of the most amazing things that I find again and again when I find these stories is the people who go through them and survive. They're all like this. They look at their life as an absolute miracle. And just surviving what they survived was a miracle. But you know, they wake up every day deeply grateful for having had another day on Earth that wasn't involving Joseph Kony, right? And that to me was so inspiring that people could go through what they went through and come out the other side, not as broken people, but as stronger, you could argue, transcendent people, because they certainly transcended their situation and went to a whole other level of life. And that's really what fascinated me about them.
Yeah, so, in terms of that, I guess we're gonna get to it. I don't know which one to ask you first, but I'll come back to that just a second, in terms of that, how they were transcended. But what was the most emotional part of the story for you to write? Was it that Nile birth scene? Was there one particular scene, one particular chapter that was, you had to lock yourself in a room? I mean, I know that I've had to write a couple. I lock myself in a room. I don't come out for a day. I got to become this character I don't want to be, or whatever it might be. How do you? What was that for you?
For me, it was probably the death of the thumbsucker.
Uh,
To me, that was just devastating. And I didn't want to write it, and I had to. And I was crying when I was writing it. It was just brutal, and them taking the photographs of the kids and making them convinced that they had been murderers, and it was just like I would throw my hands up at times and go, "This is just awful," that anybody, any human, much less a child, should go through something like this.
Can I have a show of hands of who, besides Christine, I know, and myself, that felt that was the worst scene, the hardest? Yeah, let's see, Mark, yeah, just to get a sense, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, the scene in the Nile, that is where Florence transcends in one sense. She becomes bigger than a victim right there, and it's because she's going to protect her child, both children, and she's going to get them out of there, and she's going to do it through the power of love, right? And this was interesting, when I was talking to Florence when I was in Uganda, in all those long conversations, maybe about the fifth or sixth day, I'm listening to all this stuff, and it doesn't come out the way it's presented in the book. It comes out piecemeally, right? You're asking questions, and you're trying to create a timeline to understand when everything happened. And I said, well, hold on a second, Florence, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I hear this story is you were saved by the power of love. And she looked at me and she went, that is exactly what happened to us. That is exactly what happened to us. And I remember going, okay, now I know how to tell this story. Once she was clear that this is what happened, I became very clear on how I was going to do it. And my goal was to leave people, when they shut it, that they felt like immensely uplifted by what had happened. Ultimately, they were uplifted by what had happened.
Yeah, for me, this book was as much about, sort of that perseverance story, that going from, hopeless situation to hope, as it was about, I'm gonna say, identity. I mean, what happened, I think, to this Coney, awful person, megalomaniac that he was, egomaniac, all those things, trying to strip their identity and replace it with something evil, push the good out,
Yeah.
and make it, and make them evil. Yet that sense of self-worth, or that what you called, and I guess they called, good human person, was maybe deep in there, but sort of came through. And I think that was particularly true for Anthony, because this guy, Coney, clearly was playing on whatever weakness he could play on to exploit, those ghosts that these little children, and little children, right, they have, in order to, build them up to become his own little mini me monsters. But yet Anthony was able to see past that. I guess that, was that something that you sort of focused on when you're writing as well, or?
Yes, absolutely. So I wrote it and I had it down, and as I said, I go to India, and I have there's a lady there that I study with who's very sharp. She's one of the smartest people I've ever known, and I've been talking to her on and off about the story for years. And I said to her, Anthony was taught to be a good human, Florence was taught there's nothing stronger than the power of love, and they were able to cling to this. And this was, virtues or principles that enabled them to survive. And she looked at me, she goes, "That's not what happened." And I was like, "Really?" I said, "What happened?" And she said, "They were taught those things by people who felt unconditional love for them. And because of that unconditional love, these things anchored in their hearts. And once they were anchored, they're impossible to destroy." And it gave me a different understanding of the book. And I had to go back and look at it again. And she was totally right. Because when you met Anthony's father and Florence's mother, sources of unconditional love for children. A lot of, the argument is that if children experience unconditional love, they never forget it. It's part of them. If they don't experience unconditional love, then they're going to have trouble. It's pretty simple, but it's true,
Yeah, well, and unfortunately, it's complicated. You know what I'm saying? In terms of, you look at our world today. So interesting. That's where you came on that, because that didn't occur to me. But other than the identity theme, finding their self-worth again and who they were, I thought was an important underpinning. But I didn't pin it on that. Very, very interesting. I'm going to open it up. I've got a ton more questions, but I could talk to you for a whole hour, and then no one would get any time to sort of pipe in. So I know there's questions. Miriam is probably, Janet, yes. I'm waiting because I know you guys are just itching to do this. So Janet is from California on the West Coast, not too terribly far from you, Mark. I'm going to let her, the Bay Area.
Yeah. Hi, I just want to say that I love your books. The writing is so plain and honest, and at times brutal, but just so simply. The stories are told so simply and straightforward. It's just they just touch my soul. But I want to just say one serendipitous thing. A good friend of mine, when I read your blurb this time, I saw that part about your having been in Niger in the Peace Corps. He was in Niger in the Peace Corps for 7 years. And he doesn't remember your name, so you might be younger than him. But I just thought that was kind of like, pretty interesting. And you've got a new fan, because I've told I was at a Shabbat dinner the other night, and I told a friend of mine who likes these kinds of stories, historical fiction, and I was like on my last 50 pages, and I said, "You have to read this book by Mark Sullivan and his other books." And so he was like, "Yeah, okay, I really do. I want to read all about the child soldiering in Uganda." So he's a new fan. But I want to bring up the part about the shopkeeper and the emotions, because we haven't talked about that at all. Because that was this recurring theme that just kept Anthony going throughout his whole 10-year ordeal. And it was just amazing how he could just call whenever he was like paralyzed with the fear or whatever, the rush or whatever, the thing that was, killing him, making him want to die from this ordeal, that he just was able to call up those, 4 things that the shopkeeper, told him about. And did it really happen that way? That guy just, as he was dying, was telling him this stuff? And
that's a little bit of dramatic license on my part, but Anthony understood this stuff inherently. He was the one who was telling me about my mind would race. I couldn't control it.
Yeah.
And suffering, understanding that there was a difference between pain and suffering. So, that, was there a shopkeeper? Was he in a bomb? Was he bombed out? Yes. But I decided to make Mr. Mobior his guide. And it's as much so
Yeah.
that the reader understands this philosophy as he does, right? I mean, you see him live all the way through there with those skills that he kind of naturally had and he learned from various people. I put him into one person so it would make sense narratively.
I felt like when I
Does,
was, oh, sorry.
does Anthony know about the ongoing child soldiering, like in the Middle East?
Of course, that's why they wanted to do this.
And-
They wanted it all ended, and they believe that
And
there's.
do they travel outside Uganda? Do they speak and travel outside Uganda?
That's the plan. You know, I'm part of End Child Soldiering, the nonprofit. I'm on the board. This is what Eric and Mick started, you know, when they first heard the story. And they believe that if the story got out, it could drive this nonprofit and we could set about trying to end it. And Anthony and Florence
Thank you.
are eager to be spokesmen for that cause.
Good.
I felt like the shopkeeper was almost the polar opposite of General Corey, that you almost wrote that to kind of counterbalance his evil. I might be wrong in that, but that was
Well,
one
he
of my
certainly functions that way, doesn't he? He functions as an antidote to evil, an
Right.
antidote to suffering. And Anthony, you know, it's like he's thrown a lifeline and he grabs it and he holds on to it.
Mm. All right, Carol? Carol's from Boston, Mark?
Hi. So, hi. So first I wanted to say that being a social studies professor, geography, history person, I love when there's maps in the book, and I love when I can take an atlas and put it on my lap and look and see where everything occurred. And I do have to confess, I didn't finish because I finally got the book at the library. I couldn't even get it at Barnes and Noble.
Oh, that's too bad.
They
It's
said,
what's
we don't
been
have
so
this
popular.
in stock.
Right, and by the way,
So-
Carol, you know that Mark is a map guy. I mean, I think every book you've got, you got a map in there, Mark.
I know. And I remember reading the Piano Tuner and having the map of Burma on my lap. Well, now they call it obviously Myanmar, but so I wanted to just ask a question. I love your writing, and I listened actually the other day to the Poison Pen bookstore when you were there, so I could sort of like fill in a little bit where I know that our dear Sharon, our dear leader, who brings us all this wonderful joy, was discussing with you about having emotional situation with writing it. And then my grandson called in, so I had to get off for 5 minutes. So I hope nobody asks you this one. Did you ever feel like you were going to stop writing it midpoint because of how much the subject matter was affecting you?
Never. No, I was on a mission to write the story. The story had to be done in a very specific way, and I could feel the challenge of it, but this is kind of an aside, but you have to sort of have to know where I was going into this. So as I said, I go to India a lot, and if you ever heard me interviewed, people ask me how I got involved in writing, and I always tell the same story. You know, a 6 foot, 200-pound penguin in parochial school broke up a fight with me and another kid, and this is back when they used to be able to hit you, you know, and I figured I was going to get hit with the nun's 3-sided ruler. Instead, she said, Mark Sullivan, your punishment is you will go home and write a story and enter it in the grades 1 through 8 short story writing contest. And so, you know, I'll keep it short. I did. I had no idea what I was doing. After a while, I began to understand why it was punishment, because I faced writer's block for the first time, you know, and but a rabbit went burning through our backyard with a beagle chasing it, and they went out into this farm field where I used to play all the time, And so I went, okay, and I wrote this story about this rabbit being chased by the neighbor's beagle. And I turned it in, and 2 weeks later, my parents get pulled into the principal's office, and they slide the paper across, and they say, which one of you wrote it? And my parents said, we've never seen this before. What is it? And they said, it's the winning entry in the grades 1 through 8 short story writing contest. And then I had to get up and read it in front of the whole school, and everybody cheered. And I was like, oh, okay, all right, this is good. And, but that was like my formative thing. And so I go to India, and they ask me, how'd you become a writer? And so I tell them, and I'm talking to monks, basically, okay? And there's female monks and male monks. And the females are very, very sharp on this stuff. And so they were asking me, what's it like to, this is like 7 years ago now, what's it like for you to go to work every day? And I said, well, it's like when I used to play lacrosse or football, I get all pumped up, I'm going in there, I've got quotas, you know, I won't come out of the room without having accomplished so much, on and on and on. And they're like, do you like writing? And I was like, I like writing. I said, I'm good at it. This is something I've always been good at, and you know, it's rewarding because I'm good at it, and I get rewarding for it. And they said, but you don't really like it, right? And I was like, you know, it's difficult. It's your long hours by yourself, room, and everything. And
Yeah.
finally, this one female monk goes, you don't get it, do you? I'm like, what? And she said, Mark, from the time you were 7 years old, writing was punishment. And I was like, I was stunned. I mean, I really was. I was shaken by it. Because I could see it. You know, I could see it the very first thing. It was delivered as a form of punishment. And basically, I'd been sort of whipping myself for decades, right? And I remember talking to my wife from India, and I said, I'm done. I'm not going to punish myself anymore. I'm done. And anyway, I go back in the next day, and the same monks are there, these two women in there. So how you doing? I go, not too good. You basically showed me that my entire career had been about self-flagellation, you know, and I'm not doing it anymore. And they started laughing at me. They did. And I got seriously angry. And they're like, I said, why are you laughing? And they're going, what if you could stop writing from a place of punishment and you could write from a place of joy? And I said, is that possible? And they said, it is, and we can teach you. And they did. And believe it or not, I wrote this entire book from a place of joy. As brutal as it was, as tough as it was, I was writing from, this is something that I can do, and it's a gift that I can give. And that is a beautiful thing. And because of that, it was without a doubt the fastest book I've ever written. The first draft came out in like 6.5 months, which is flying for me. Flying. And I worked on it for another 1.5 years, believe me, and you know, upended it, tweaked and everything. But at no time did I consider the work.
It's really obvious, actually, in the way it's written, because you did such an amazing job making us feel such sympathy for some, such hatred. I mean, like real hatred for others, and even like a little bit of indifference for some other people. But, you know, even Patrick, like his arc was amazing, even though he was a minor character. Yeah, and the parents, yeah. So yeah, I could tell that you were definitely, it was such a hard book, like the topics was hard, and some of what you were having to write and share with us was hard, but there was always like a light at the end of the tunnel through all of it. So that was lovely.
Can I ask, since you were talking about writing, why third person?
Limited third person allows me some degree of objectivity.
Yeah, and I think that would just, I'm with you on that, Mark. In terms of this particular story, I don't think you could have written it from first person.
No.
No way.
No. Thanks.
Eileen is an author as well, and she is up next. Hello, Miss Eileen. I haven't seen you in a bit. You okay, hon?
Yeah, I haven't been able to get some of the books, so I haven't showed up, but hopefully I'm back now and things are getting
Good.
along more rationally. Mark, I enjoyed your book, but I had a question about, there seemed to be a lot, you focused a good portion of the book, let's say, on the strategies and the battles. And I
Yeah.
guess I would have preferred less of that and more of how the families coped after Anthony and Florence were kidnapped, how they functioned as a group with that missing piece.
Yeah.
Is there any reason why you went the way you did instead of going more into the character study of the families?
I felt because of everything that they had gone through that the important thing was to focus on them. And they were soldiers. Anthony was in battle after battle after battle. And because he becomes Coney's radio man, I felt it was key to focus on what was happening so that people would understand that it wasn't just a fly-by-night thing, that Coney's army was real, that it was formidable, that pound for pound, these kids were the toughest fighters on earth. Forced into it, yes. But I also felt that I did have to show the other side. 10-year ordeal, I felt nervous cutting away from what was happening to them too many times to what happened to the parents. And that was, my call. Whether it was the right one or the wrong one, it's the one I went with, just because I wanted people to understand, first of all, a decade of this poor kid's life, right, is spent in combat. And it was largely for nothing. That's the horrible thing about it, is it was a waste, of two incredibly promising people. But I can understand your position that it would have been, in a certain respect, more balanced if we dealt with that. But I could interview George, for example, his father, at length, and did, but his mother was dead, and I was able to interview Florence's mother. She was great. But I wanted to keep the camera, in a sense, on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Eileen. Teresa lives in my backyard over here, just on the other side of the ridge.
Yeah.
In Virginia.
Oh, hi there. Your book was just unbelievable. I just whipped through it, even though it was really, really good. And I was so thrilled to realize, I thought, oh, is this going to have like some unrealistic happy ending? Well, it did have an unrealistic happy ending, but that happened to be true. And
Yeah.
when I looked at the picture of Anthony and Florence and their family, I mean, that's what you saw, was just joy all over their face. It really was such a moving story. I don't know what kind of cave I was living in during that time. I was really unaware and ignorant to what was going on truly in Uganda. So I really appreciated, as hard as it was to read, the battle scenes and just like, so what happens to the women who are having babies and you have nothing to eat and you get injured and just trying to go about living with a toddler in those circumstances. Really, really an amazing book. And just one other thing, the shopkeeper, to me, when ever Anthony and then Florence started referencing what the shopkeeper had said, to me, it was just like him taking a minute and redirecting themselves, like, okay, like kind of this too shall pass, or we hope it'll pass. And
Right.
It was really incredible. And I really appreciate you telling the story, and definitely have recommended the book to so many people. And you are really gifted. Those nuns really saw something in you at such a young age.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you for saying all that. Appreciate it.
Well, oh, Mark, I'm
Okay.
forever going to now remember the story of the bunny and the beagle. That's gonna be like, my little, you should have a little icon, emoji that the Bunny and the Beagle story. Very, very good. Jane Sackman. Jane, you're Ohio, right? I think.
Hi, Jen. I'm from New York,
New
Manhattan.
York. Okay. Miriam's
Ah.
Ohio. I got you wrong, Miriam. I'm confusing people tonight.
Oh, don't worry. It's
Hi.
okay. Hi. So first of all, I love the book as well. It was quite difficult at times. So I started to read the book, but then I started to listen to it. And I want everyone to know it's that audio version was just, I felt every moment from the time I started to listen to the book, the voices, I was in there. I was fighting there. I was exhausted when they, the escapes, and so the audio version is really quite meaningful. It's very challenging to read because you feel like you are with them in the battle. So I have to give kudos to for the audio version as well.
So let me talk a little bit about that. They bring me audio narrators to listen to, and Junior Nyong'o, he was from Kenya. And he's actually the brother of Lupita Nyong'o, who won the Academy Award for 12 Years a Slave. And he's a Shakespearean trained actor as well as a disc jockey. And that was the first, he's done 2 children's books, and that was the first adult book he'd never narrated. And he just killed it.
There were nights that I couldn't go to sleep. I was up till 3 a.m. listening because I was on a journey with them.
Yeah.
And I felt the feelings of each character was so true. And then one other thing, this is not the major character, but I love the relationship with Patrick and Anthony. It's I felt once he pulled, it showed the goodness, and the love started when Anthony went after his foe. After he won, he could have been boasting, and he was the first one to jump in the river. And I think that the power of love and friendship came through at that moment. It was like foreshadowing. Of course, at that moment, I would have never, I didn't know the rest of the story, but I thought that was and that Patrick really kept his promise. And it was a beautiful friendship among such evil and horror and what they all went through.
Right.
So.
Good.
Okay.
Can I
Thank
ask
you, Jane.
more?
Christine, you have Miriam, I'm waiting for you. I know you always have a couple. Diane, I know you're out there.
I had one more about Mama Leopard. I loved the Mama Leopard theme. It wasn't, I didn't feel like it was only Florence. I felt like it was Florence's mom carrying her all the way home from the hospital, with Florence herself, protecting her babies and born and unborn, getting them out of harm's way. And then I loved how you took the Mama Leopard and almost not protected, but revenge for Anthony's mom, the Mama Leopard. Like, don't come between a mother and her cubs. I was like, I loved how that literally got weaved through in different ways, in really unique ways in the book.
Excellent.
So you had some symbolism in there, huh, Mark?
Yeah, leopard becomes a symbol of Anthony, and it's that secret life he has, right? It's the life, it's the part of his soul that can't be touched by Coney. And so that becomes a metaphor that takes us all the way through. And he really did think of himself as deep down hiding who he was, holding on to who he was. And I, just tried to do my best to recreate how that worked in his mind. And, that stuff with the leopard turned out to be some of the more powerful things that happened in the book, I thought. So, yeah.
I was actually I think I might have clapped when the leopard saved his life and took, what was his name? What was that tracker's name? What was his name? Oh, Bakya? Is that his name? Yeah.
So we have Diane with her hand up. Diane is an author as well, Mark. She's also a former doctor. And I believe, Diane, you spent some time in Africa when you were practicing medicine, correct?
No.
No, I got the wrong one then. Okay.
But I worked a lot in the inner cities and it was kind of rough.
Okay.
And worked with kids. And so I have to say, I had an incredibly hard time, and I stopped reading when the Thumbsucker. I just and I think, and possibly that's because of some of the real life situations, you know, that I've been involved in. And so my question as a writer is, did you feel that treating writing about violence towards children versus violence towards adults, did you have to like take special precautions, or did you see that as different, or just all a continuum of, you know? And I'm you know, the book was excellent, I'm sure. It's just something that I couldn't personally
I hear you.
participate in.
As I said, that was the most difficult thing that I had to write. And, but, you know, this is what they did. To ignore it would have been filtering who Coney was. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted him to come through in all of his evil. And, you know, I'm the kind of writer, I tend to believe that the thing that scares you the most in terms of writing about something is the thing you have to go right at. If you were unwilling to face the thing you're scaring the most, you're never going to write anything of power. You have to face that. And, you know, me facing what happened to the Thumbsucker and all the other things they did to these kids, like the bayoneting scene. I mean, I didn't want to write it, but it happened, you know? And so again, you know, I'm of the belief that the best stuff comes when the writer faces the things that they fear the most. And so that's why I did it. And as a result, you know, that if you know, well, you didn't read it, finish it. But anyway, Anthony is haunted by that 10 years later. You know, he brings it up when he's talking to the people who are interrogating him after he has surrendered and escaped and surrendered. And he brings it up and they say it's okay. They told this to all the people. Almost every kid saw this. And so again, to have not faced that I think it would have affected the quality of the book and the truth of the book. The truth of the matter is that they did do this. And I didn't, by avoiding it in any way, was going to help me, you know.
So I guess what I can say is having treated children, to me, it would be just like a reliving it again. And I didn't think that was a good thing for me personally, but I'm sure
Understood.
it's very effective.
And Diane, then we're glad to have you on the phone tonight, even though, you know, I know that can happen, right? But I'm just glad that you joined us and that, you know, you're still with us.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because everybody's different in their makeup and what appeals to them. And I was interested to see how it was all put together. You know what I mean? Like what went into it and the whole different ways you can look at it, because every reader's different.
Thanks, Diane. Miriam Khan. Miriam is from Ohio and is a
Hi.
reviewer.
So I guess I'm in the minority. I couldn't read your book. I couldn't get it to start. I couldn't get interested in it. And maybe it's the place I'm in right now in my life, or with whatever's going on in the world. But that doesn't mean that I don't like your writing, you know. So I guess I'm going to ask the question of what are you working on next?
I'm trying to find one.
Uh-oh.
I'm trying to find a story that the power that I'm looking for, and I haven't found it yet. I've come very close twice, and when I really sat down and analyzed the story, they didn't have what I was looking for. There was, first of all, there was nothing about the stories that frightened me. Nothing. And I went, if it doesn't frighten me, I'm not going to be able to push my boundaries. I'm always looking to grow as a writer, and I just haven't found one. And I don't want to settle for doing a story that I don't think is going to have the kind of impact that I'm interested in having. So,
and when you
at the
say impact,
moment-
Mark, what kind of impact are you thinking? Like, this sort of
Yeah,
transformative sort of read?
Yeah, I'm interested in novelizing true stories that have never been told before, that have this inherent power to them, that have this inherent, they're moving, they're inspiring, they're healing to some readers, transformative to others, and frankly, off-putting to some people. I don't mind. I don't have to have every reader. It's not my goal. My goal is to have the readers that I do engage, I want them to shut my books and feel like they've been changed.
Well, I'm looking forward to the next one that hopefully will do that for me.
Great.
All right, and then Teresa, and then I have to sort of begin to wrap this up, but yes, Teresa, what you got? You're on mute, sweetheart.
The thumbsucker and the making all of the children, step on his little head and take their picture. And they did that, what was that, day one or night? I think it was like within hours of kidnapping them. That was how they started. For lack of a better word, grooming them. You can't go back now. You're a murderer and everybody's going to see that. I mean, you think of the young age of these children, so I don't see how you could have left it out as absolutely horrific as it was. And I don't know how some people think, but it's very evil. And they never found Coney.
So when we went to press, the best information that we had from the CIA was that Coney had died of syphilis somewhere in Northern Republic of Congo. There was an article published in Rolling Stone like 12 days before the book came out that he's alive, and the Wagner group, I don't know if you know who they are.
Yep.
I do.
This rogue group of Russian mercenaries, that they are in the Congo hunting Coney.
Well, they should be looking for someone in a dress.
Yeah, exactly right.
As cowardly as he was.
Yeah, he was a coward.
He's probably in a full burqa covering his face too.
Probably.
There you go. Yeah.
All bullies are cowards, right?
Yeah, but the great thing about it is that, as Anthony said, I forgave him, but I would testify against him tomorrow.
Right.
And the thing you got to remember is Anthony was the prime witness against Ongo and a number of the other henchmen. You can look it up, just Google. You won't get his name, but you'll see, I can't remember what his witness number, 104 or something, the radio man, Coney's radio man. And he went to The Hague twice and testified for 3 days at a shot. And most people believe that it was Anthony's testimony that put them away. And it will be Anthony's testimony that puts Coney away if he's ever caught. No doubt. I mean, he was transferring, he was hitting the radio. Everything that Coney said, he knew.
Yeah. Really quick, Jane?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much for bringing this book to the world, because I must admit that I'm the one, by the way, who listened to the audio. So I kind of feel like I lived this, but yeah. I must admit that I never knew as much about all this that went on for years ago. And, especially a lot of us in the world today, we're thinking what's going on in Russia, what's going on in the Middle East. And there is not as much attention brought out to the atrocities that go on in this part of Africa. And so it was very fascinating for me and kind of very educational to learn about this. And so I think that whether you can finish the book or not, it's at least good to know, to make people aware. Yeah. I know a few people here were not able to finish, and I fully get it. Everyone has their, has a different tolerance to this. It was not an easy book, but I learned so much about this, and I'm grateful to have read it. Great, so thank you for bringing this to the world and doing all this hard work. It's not just you're writing the book, you really did research, and you're bringing this to the world to know what's going on there.
Yeah, it's not just there, it's happening all over the world. Where there is a rebel conflict, it's almost guaranteed they're using child soldiers.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And especially very current now in the Middle East, what's going on there. I can imagine how many.
There are no doubt child soldiers in Gaza.
Mhm.
Well,
No
and on that note, 'cause I was going to ask you a question about, because we talked about this when we did your review on the last Green Valley, that, you know, it was something about silver stars, but I'm not gonna, we haven't really got time for that question right now, but I did want to bring up, based on what Jane just said and about other places where there's child soldiering, you're donating the proceeds of this book to organizations to help children in these situations, correct?
Correct. There's a significant portion of it.
And I
to
think it's going to end childhood soldiering, right?
endchildsoldiering.com. You can go on the website, find out more about it. You can find out more about Anthony and Florence there as well.
So what I was going to suggest, folks, is that, you know, if this book, you know, really did strike you as it struck many of us, you know, you can donate to the board that Mark sits on, and I know that you would be good stewards of that. And what I'm going to propose is that Avery is on the phone. Avery, raise your hand. She's going to wave at us. She runs our family foundation here. And for every dollar up to, let's say, 10,000, I'm making it up now as I go, that you all donate, I will match, our foundation will match. And Mark, I just need you guys to, you know, Mark can verify for me, but I'll give you a list of names, Mark, of folks that come in. I think there's a way for them to reference that they're a member of my book club, so I can do that matching.
Yeah, I think so. Let me contact Mick and make sure of that. But yes, we can do a matching scenario. That would be huge, and I'm very moved. That's very generous of you. Thank you.
Well, we got to help each other out. You know how this works in this world. I mean, and there's such evil, and for you to have, you know, brought this to our attention and the world's attention, I think that we all need to act. Carol, you get a hand up quickly. Can Carol do anything quickly?
Yes.
Yes.
No.
No.
So just want to say, some of us listen to audio, some of us read. For those of people out there who do neither, is there any talk about any visual? I'm not going to say Netflix. I'm not going
Film
to
rights
say
is we're
movie,
talking about.
but did he
I
talk
hope
about this
so.
already?
Not yet, but I think it'll happen. The story is just too.
Because I think it, you know, especially if we can like fast forward the thumb sucking, I guess, it probably would be a very potent thing for people who aren't readers.
Yeah. I'm in full agreement. If you got any contacts, let me know.
I
got
actually do.
people in
I sit on the board of a film festival, and there's somebody here. Where is she? Where's my gal? That's where is she? There's a gal in here that writes movie stuff, production.
She's not here tonight, I
Not here
don't think.
tonight. Thank you, Carol. Remind us to let her know. But I'm on the board of a film festival, and I have a number of guys that do. You know, the guys that did Peanut Butter Falcon. Those guys I know, but that's my only connection. Sorry, that and Anthony McCartan.
That's okay. That's great.
That's okay. Mark, I
This
want to
would be a
thank
good
you.
Anthony McCartan, Sharon. This would be a good
Yeah, I
one.
do know Anthony, but we'll see. He's we'll talk, Mark. I want to thank you, Mark, for really coming on. And also, guys, Mark did do a glowing review. Thank you so much, Mark, on my book that's coming out in the fall, The Graves of Truth. And I hope you liked it. It's not your kind of book, but it's a little different, but you know, based on a true story.
I enjoyed it a lot. I thought it was great.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you coming and joining us, Mark. I know you've got something to do this evening, so I'll let you run. And then I do have an announcement for the rest of my team. You're welcome to stay, but I was going to let you know that I do have a couple announcements for the group.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks,
Thank
Mark.
you.
Thank you
Good
so
luck.
much.
Good luck.
Bye.
Thank you.